Okay, so section 19. We're going to start at Exodus 24. And again, we're not reading everything, but we went over a little bit about this last time, where we had gone through the three pilgrimage feasts, and then God promises that when they get to the land, he's going to drive all the people out of the land that are in the land now. Now, remember, they hadn't been in the land for 435 years, roughly. So all kind of other people had settled there now. So there were like a few people there when Abraham was there, of course. There were people there, but now even more people have come, and there were a bunch of different societies there. Jebusites and Perizzites and Amorites and all the ites all lived in there, including megabytes and mosquito bites. So God says, I'm going to drive them out of the land little by little. In other words, they're going to be taken out of the land, not all at once, so that, all their stuff is still going to be there, and gradually they're all going to be gone, and it's going to be your land. So then, of course, the people Moses made the altar, made the sacrifice, said this is the blood of the covenant, sprinkled them with the blood, and the people say, whatever the Lord says, we're going to do. So, like we always do. And then you walk out of the church and you're yelling at somebody in the parking lot, or I'm yelling at somebody on TV and saying they should take him and hang him. And, I just came from church. But we always say, well, whatever the Lord wants me to do, I'll do. But it doesn't usually last very long. Well, these people didn't last very long at all. So when we go into 24, God does something interesting. He says, now he said to Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord. But they shall not come near, nor shall the people go up with them. So God tells Moses and 70 elders to come up the mountain, but only Moses can approach. Aaron, he's not officially the high priest yet, but he's going to be high priest very shortly. The elders and these other two guys that he mentions, they can't approach the Lord. Only Moses can. So only Moses can go into the holy place. And again, this is where Moses is a type of Messiah. He becomes a type of Yeshua, Jesus. He's the only one that can go into the holy place. In other words, I love the song, we enter the Holy of Holies, we enter by the blood of the Lamb. We can't go into the holy place ourselves. And as we see when God establishes Yom Kippur, which we celebrate it, when a Messiah, we celebrate it all the time. But, the high priest was the only one allowed to go into the Holy of Holies, and only once a year, and he always had to take blood with him to atone for the sins of the people. And doesn't that sound familiar? So you have to have blood to atone for the sins of the people. In the holy place, only one person can go into the holy place. Here it's Moses. The writer to the Hebrews tells us that Jesus went into the ultimate holy place, the tabernacle not built by human hands, which are the heavens, and he went through it with his own blood. And instead of sprinkling blood on the mercy seat, he took his blood to the throne for the sins of the people. So it's an exact fulfillment. I'm not sure if you'd call it parallel, but because it's an exact fulfillment. Moses goes alone. Later, the high priest goes alone. Then Jesus goes alone. Jesus is the only one who can take the blood into the holy place because it's his blood. So here we have a type of that because only Moses is allowed to enter the holy place. Because at this point, he's the mediator of the covenant. He mediates between God and the people. Yeshua, Jesus, mediates between God and the people. He's the eternal high priest. Moses and Aaron are, well, Moses doesn't become a priest officially, but Aaron becomes the high priest. They are mediating for the people. They stand between God and the people. We can approach God in a very different way than they could approach. Because now not only could we call him Abba, Daddy, but now we're adopted sons and daughters. These people, covenant people, special people, but they're not adopted sons and daughters. They got to be very careful how they do it. So God says, only Moses comes up here. You guys stay down there. They go like, a little different level. So Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and the judgments. We already covered this. And the people said, all the words which the Lord has said we will do. So he writes down all the words of the law. So during this time, Moses is writing down the Torah, which of course are the books of the law. They're the books of, there's so many different words you can use. Revelation of God, law, direction we should go, how to live your life. All these things, of course, come in Torah. And many Jewish believers will say that Jesus is the living Torah because everything is personified in him as Messiah. So he sprinkles the blood, and we're going to see that life is in the blood, it's going to say later. Everybody's life is in their blood in the sense of, if your kidneys stop working, you're not going to die right away. You may live a few weeks and then die. Some other organs, different. But if your heart fails and blood's not being pumped, you live for about 3 minutes, maybe 4, or maybe you may instantly die. But if blood's not circulating, you die. If blood doesn't circulate through even a limb for a certain amount of time, the limb dies and has to be amputated. Life is in the blood. You know that if something happens where you're bleeding profusely, you can exsanguinate in a short period of time once you've lost enough blood. First you get pale and sweaty, and then you pass out, and then you die. So life is literally in the blood. They didn't understand how blood circulated. It always blew my mind that people didn't understand blood circulated until the 1600s in England. You wondered, they felt somebody's heart beating. They're like, what was it doing? Just beating, So, the life is in the blood because blood is what keeps you alive by circulating. Bring oxygen, bring nutrition, but it's the oxygen part of it that kills you pretty quick. The nutrition takes a while. So then Moses went up, also Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders, and they saw the God of Israel. Now, it doesn't really tell us, but they went up and they saw something. They saw his glory somehow. And then it goes on to say, and there was under his feet as if it were a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. So they had some kind of a vision of God's glory with precious stones and clear, everything's clear and bright. And it says, so they saw God and they ate and drank. So in the presence of God's glory, they ate and drank. So here's a prefigurement of communion, a prefigurement of the Lord's Supper, prefigurement of the Eucharist. In God's presence, you eat and drink. Isn't that cool? And they did it on the mountain. So, and of course, we're going to, when we go to heaven, being in heaven is called the marriage supper of the Lamb. So we're going to eat and drink. It's going to be a forever marriage feast. I mean, it's going to be one awesome wedding reception with lots of food and lots of drinks. So how cool is that? Then the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and be there, and I will give you tablets of stone and the law and the commandments which I have written, that you may teach them." So he tells Moses to come up because he's going to give you 2 stone tablets. God's going to give the tablets to Moses. Now these are the original tablets that the 10 commandments are written on, the 10 words. God not only writes the words with his finger, but provides the stone tablets. When Moses breaks these later on, he has to go back up, but he has to cut out tablets. And God doesn't write the law with his fingers. Moses has to write it because they've disobeyed. So this, of course, symbolizes the law isn't a permanent thing. The 10 Commandments are a permanent thing. They're, as we say in our language, it's written in stone. He doesn't. All the other laws Moses can write on parchment or whatever kind of paper they had, but the commandments are written on the stones. And if they ever find the Ark of the Covenant, which I hope they'll find just before Jesus comes back, and I hope it's this afternoon, when they find the Ark, the second set of tablets are going to be inside the Ark. So we'll see that, and we'll see some manna. That'd be pretty cool. All right, so I hope they find the Ark today. Jesus comes tomorrow. But I hope it's not going to be too long. More than a week, I'm going to be disappointed. So Moses arose with his assistant Joshua. Now we heard about Joshua again. This is the second time we hear about Joshua. Joshua's kind of his administrative assistant. He didn't want to be called a secretary, so that's where the term administrative assistant came in. Ooh, this is a tough crowd. So Moses arose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up the mountain of God. And he said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we come back to you." So down in 15, then Moses went up into the mountain, and a cloud covered the mountain. So this is the glory cloud. This is the Shekinah in Hebrew. It's the very presence of God in the form of a cloud. We see this in the wilderness. They saw the cloud every day. When they get to the land, they see the cloud some of the time, not all of the time. When the first temple's dedicated, the glory cloud fills the temple, and Solomon's trying to say a prayer. He's trying to dedicate the temple, but the glory is so thick that the priests can't minister, the choir can't sing, and Solomon can't talk. So they all have to go outside of the building because they can't see anything because there's so much glory in the building. It's how cool is that? Woo! And then they see it off and on, and then when just before the Babylonians destroy the temple in 586 BC, Ezekiel, who's already in Babylon, has a vision of the glory cloud. Now get this, the glory cloud comes out of the temple, goes across the Kidron Valley to the top of the Mount of Olives, and then goes into heaven, just like Jesus did when he ascended. And then he knew the temple was going to be destroyed because the glory was gone, because it had been profaned. In fact, our name Ichabod means no more glory. The glory's gone. So the cloud covers the mountain. Now the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. On the 7th day, he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. The sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. So Moses went into the midst of the cloud and went up the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So this glory cloud, God speaks out of the cloud. So for 6 days, they're kind of like there. Then on the seventh day, he calls Moses to come into the cloud. The seventh day, of course, is the Sabbath. Can't overemphasize how important that is. When we get to the end of Exodus, we're going to see celebrating the Sabbath is the covenant between me and you, between me and the children of Israel. And if you don't do anything else, you have to keep the Sabbath. In fact, to this very day, the Jews define somebody as being a faithful Jew, an observant Jew, if they keep the Sabbath. That's the kind of the minimum requirement. To keep the Sabbath, you're in. I mean, that's how, even if you don't do the other feasts, even if you have a ham sandwich, I mean, even if you keep the Sabbath, no, I'm being facetious, of course. Even though Jordan's not here, you're doing a good job keeping it. But, so keeping the Sabbath, so the seventh day, he goes in there. So how cool is that? And of course, Moses walks into it, and it says it looked like a consuming fire. Whoa, to the children of Israel. So the people at the bottom saw what looked like a consuming fire, and Moses walked right into it. They said, we're never going to see that dude again. Moses is toast, literally. Ooh, boy, you guys are tough. So, I have listed there's two other times God's called there's two times God's called a consuming fire. Here, the cloud is called the consuming fire. But in Deuteronomy 4:24 and Hebrews 12:29, God's referred to as a consuming fire that'll take care of everything. You know, if you're on the wicked, evil side, you're going to get consumed by the fire. You know, God, in Deuteronomy, God says, I'm going before you like a consuming fire. I'm going to get rid of all these people like a consuming fire. So, yeah. Yeah. So he's there 40 days and 40 nights. And he fasted during this time. Moses, Elijah, and Jesus are three people in the Bible that have a 40-day fast. I think we just recently did Jesus in the desert at one in Messiah, and he had no food or water for 40 days, which is not really physiologically possible. Well, the food part is, but the water part's not. But we have to believe it. So Moses and Elijah went on 40-day fasts. I don't know if you ever knew Rick Evans at Parma Heights Vineyard. He used to do these 40-day fasts where he would just live on juices. And one day he came on with us on a trip to Mexico. And he said, I'm in the middle of a 40-day fast. What should I do? And I said, I think you should eat. You're going to be high altitude. It's going to be. So I said, well, I think. But by the second day there, he said, I think I got to eat something. I said, I don't think God wants you to die here in Mexico City. You better eat something. But anyway, so if you're watching, Rick, I hope you don't mind I told the story. But so Moses never says anywhere else what he saw during this time. He never writes it down. He never says, oh, this is what I saw, this is what I heard, this is what... Doesn't talk about his experiences at all. You know, Paul tells us, I can't remember now which letter it's in. Paul tells us he was caught up into heaven, and the things that he saw and heard he couldn't write. So he didn't describe it. You know, John in the Revelation gets caught up into heaven. And he says, I can't even describe the stuff I saw there. So Moses never writes about it. But he just tells the people what God told him to say. He doesn't describe what his experience is. And here, for the first time in church history, they take up a collection. They have to come with their tithes and offerings. No. They don't have a tithe yet. See where 25 starts. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly, from his heart, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you should take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue and purple and scarlet thread, fine linen, goat's hair, ram skin dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. According to all I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of its furnishing, just so you shall make it. Now remember, when they left Egypt, the Egyptians gave them all these precious stones, gold and silver, cloth, all this valuable stuff. And God said, when you leave Egypt, they're going to give you all that stuff, and that's how you're going to plunder Egypt. So they had all this stuff. And like we said at the time, God didn't let them get all this stuff just so they could put it in their IRAs and put it in their bank accounts and, sell it in a, whatever it is, commodities market or something. They had to have the stuff because they had to build him a sanctuary when they got into the wilderness. They didn't realize that. But now he says, okay, all these things I want from the people, if they're willing to give it. So you don't take it from them. So if some guy says, well, I got some gold here, but I'm not giving it to you. Okay, well, then he's made his decision. But for whoever's willing, just like everything else, you have free will. God never interferes with our free will. Jesus doesn't make somebody accept him. Either you do or you don't. The Holy Spirit doesn't fall on everybody. If you don't want him to come on you, he's not going to force himself on you. So here, you're going to give the stuff, but you don't have to give the stuff. He only wants it from people with a willing heart. So that makes sense. And it's the same thing, of course, today in our churches. If somebody's making $200,000 a year and they're putting $2 a week in the envelope, that's different than somebody saying, well, hey, you know what, I made $200,000, I'm going to give this much. It's a matter of their decision. It's not forced on them. Then later we're going to get the tithe, but unless you actually look at somebody's W-2, you have to take their word for it that it's a tithe. It was a lot easier in the ancient days because nobody really had anything and nobody really got a salary. But all these things are to make a sanctuary. And he's going to give specific instructions on how they're going to make it. In other words, he doesn't say, build me a church. Or he doesn't say, build me some kind of place, whatever you want to use. I'm not fussy. He's very fussy. He says, I'm going to give you the exact specifications of everything. It's going to be exactly how wide something is, how long something is, how tall something is, what it's made of, what you put on top of what goes where, arranged in the sanctuary. He doesn't say, make some kind of table and put it in there. He says, you make a table like this and you put it here. He doesn't say, just make some kind of box you can put my stuff in. No, you make it out of this wood, you put gold over it, you put it over there. It's not how you feel like it. Very specific. And you notice this is all precious stuff. He doesn't say just pick up some stones and make my sanctuary. Any old way you feel like doing it. Gold, silver, all these precious things. Acacia wood. I don't know how they possibly got enough acacia wood coming out of Egypt to build all this stuff. I don't think acacia trees grow in this desert. I don't know, but and look at the reason you're doing it. You're going to let them make a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. So he's making this because he's going to live with them. And what does this prefigure? Jesus the Messiah comes and lives with us in a sanctuary, which is a body, just like we have. And Paul says in 2 Corinthians, this is such an important issue that our bodies are actually temples of the Holy Spirit because God lives in us. He doesn't have to live in a stone temple anymore with all that stuff. He lives in us. How cool is that? When Mary and Joseph had to take little Jesus out to Egypt because Herod was going to kill all the babies, we don't know how long they were in Egypt, but during that time, they didn't have synagogues, they didn't have a temple, they didn't have anything, but they had Jesus with them. I don't know, they probably understood that to some degree, but so when they got back to Nazareth, the people said, well, what'd you guys do in Egypt? Well, we had the Messiah with us, so everything was cool. Ooh. Did I knock it out? Yeah. So see that last line there, just so you shall make it. Okay. Then they shall take an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. Okay, now a cubit, tip of your elbow to the tip of your middle finger. Obviously not standardized. Everybody's got a little bit different size cubit. Like, you're not going to use a cubit from a 1-year-old to figure that out, assuming it's from a adult man. So that's what, about 2 feet, 2.5 feet, a little more than 2 feet. So ark really isn't that big. It's like 2 of your arms and then another half an arm. So it's probably like this. It's not like a huge thing. If you go to a synagogue, they have what's called the ark, and they're always huge, like fill the whole wall. The actual ark was, maybe 4 feet across, 5 feet across. So the exact specifications of the size of it, and it says, and you shall overlay it with pure gold. Inside and out you shall overlay it, and you shall make on it a molding of gold all around. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and shall put them in its 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on one side, 2 rings on the other side. And you shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. You shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The poles shall be in the rings of the ark, and shall not be taken from it. And you shall put the ark of the testimony, and you shall put into the ark the testimony which I will give you. The testimony means the plates, the stones, the stone tablets, the 10 Commandments are the testimony. So, size, acacia wood, overlaid with gold. I don't know, have you guys ever tried to hammer metal on something? It's kind of hard to do. I mean, you have to really be a craftsman to take gold and cover something with gold and not have like 100 hammer marks and thing buckling up over here and buckling down over here and a crack in the middle. How do they know how to do that? They don't. We're going to see in a little while how they do it. So it's acacia wood overlaid with gold, rings, the poles. The poles always stay in the rings, and you carry the ark with the poles. You don't carry the ark any other way, as David was going to find out 400 and some years later. You don't just throw the ark on a cart and say, let's go. You have to carry it with the poles. So exact specifications right down to how you're going to carry it. And you're going to put the law in it. You're going to put the 10 Commandments in it, for starters. You shall make a mercy seat. Now, this is the important part. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. Of hammered work you shall make them at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub on one end, the other cherub on the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the two ends of it of one piece with the mercy seat. And the cherubim will stretch out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings. They shall face one another. The faces of the cherubim shall be toward the mercy seat. You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony which I will give you. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim which are on the ark of the testimony. So, a lot of people say, well, did God violate his own law? You're not supposed to make images, but then he told them to make two angels. Well, he's not under the law. He can do whatever he wants with the law. But he tells them you make this beautiful covering for the ark out of pure gold and two angels with their wings touching that cover the top of it. The top is here, their wings are above it. All of one piece. It's all one piece of gold. Imagine how cool that would be. How are they going to know how to do that? We're going to see. So those are the cherubim on top of the ark. And he says, that's where I'm going to meet with y'all, from the mercy seat. When the ark gets built, the Shekinah glory is always coming right out of the top of the ark. The bottom of it rests on the ark. So God's presence rests on the ark. And he says, that's where I'm going to talk to you from. Now, how cool is that? I'm going to talk to you from there. So it's going to be, I set all this up because that's where I'm going to talk to you from. In Hebrews 4:16, it's called the throne of grace. The throne of grace was originally the mercy seat, because as we're going to see, when the high priest sprinkled blood on the mercy seat, then that atoned for the people's sins. So when Jesus sits on the throne of grace, all the people's sins are covered. So how cool is that? Then he tells them to make a table out of acacia wood, covered it with gold. And you also carry that around with poles. We don't have to read all of this in detail. You're going to make sacred vessels that they're going to need for the rituals, all made out of pure gold. And the table that's going to sit in front of the whole building, just as you enter, he's going to talk about the veil. You have to put a veil, but right in front of the veil, there's going to be this beautiful table made out of acacia wood and gold, and on that table is going to be bread all the time. Calls it the show bread. I mean, all these things prefigure communion. All these things prefigure the Eucharist, prefigure the Lord's Supper. There's always going to be bread in the presence. How cool is that? And, like when people talk about, at the Last Supper, Jesus uses such common elements. Everybody knew what bread was. Nobody said, what's bread? I never heard of bread. I mean, everybody made bread. Everybody knew what wine was. He didn't say, well, you have to go get this whatever kind of food you guys might not have it around, or you have to get this other. No, bread and wine. Everybody had bread and wine in their house. Familiar substances. So here he says, you put the bread in front of the presence. How cool is that? And then he gives the instruction. Oh, and I forgot to add, that the Bible talks about heaven as the marriage supper of the Lamb. So we're going to have like a table full of food. Here there's a table with bread. We're going to have a table full of all kind of food that this also prefigures, because it's going to be the ultimate happiness, the ultimate glory. Then he gives instructions for the menorah. Everybody knows what a menorah is. Now, the menorah they're talking about here has a central candle, and then off of the centerpiece come 6 side candles. They all burn from the same oil. You can only use pure olive oil to burn. You can't use anything else. Only pure olive oil. And this is why he mentions oil to make light. So the center candle stands for God. 6 is the number of man, because man was created on the 6th day. So there's 6, 3 on each side that come off of it. So man is dependent on God in the center. And all the oil comes from the center of the thing, because it symbolizes how our whole existence depends on God's provision. He provides the oil. He provides the light. So how cool is that? And they figured out that it had to be made out of pure gold. It ended up being about 75 pounds of pure gold. So gold right now is about $1,800 an ounce. You got 75 pounds of gold. They actually, in Jerusalem, there is this menorah remade. All these things are remade for when they build the new temple. They're planning to build the new temple, the Temple Institute. I hope Bill gets to go there. But they have the menorah made exactly to these specifications. They have an ark made to these specifications. The table. They have a high priest that they've had since 2016. They have other priests that are ready to go. They've learned how to do the sacrifices. So they're ready to go as soon as they can get rid of the 2 mosques on the Temple Mount. That'll be easy. So how cool is that? And then on top of all this is going to be a tent. And you really should read all this for your homework. If you look, just briefly, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen, blue and purple and scarlet thread. With artistic designs of the cherubim, you shall weave them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits. And every one of the curtains shall have the same measurements. On and on and on. So it tells you how many loops to put in each thing, how to put the rod up. I hate putting curtain rods up. How to put the rods up, what they have to be made out of, what design you're going to put on them. Exact specifications. You don't order some kind of curtains online and whatever comes, you're going to put them up in the sanctuary. You got to make it just like this. Because he's basically saying, this is my house, and this is how I want it. This is where I'm going to meet with you, and this is how I want it. And then there's an outside tent that's made out of badger skin. I don't know where they would have found enough badgers. This is a huge tent. This isn't some little pup tent. This is a huge tent. The outside's covered with badger skin, which is very plain compared to the beautiful stuff that the inside part of it's made out of. And they picked, the ancient people picked up on this right away, because on a practical level, the more plain thing protected the more beautiful things from the weather. It kind of camouflaged the tent when they were in the desert. But it also is a sign of human beings. It's also a sign of the beauty is inside, not on the outside. Paul says we're clay vessels with glory inside. So no matter what happens to our body, we have God's glory inside of us. So whether you're, some handsome, strong 20-year-old guy who's an Olympic athlete, or you're a 98-year-old guy who can barely walk, you still have God's glory inside of you. And the ancients picked up on this right away, that this was a symbol of humanity too. So how cool is that? And then I have added there, people who are hypocrites tend to put their beauty on the outside, and their inside isn't very good. People can go somewhere and talk a great story about how righteous and holy they are. but deep inside they're not. So this is kind of a metaphor of humans. Then there's boards of acacia wood around the whole. Now your Bibles may have a picture of what the ark of what the whole sanctuary looked like, but there was a fence around it made out of acacia wood. They didn't buy like some, inexpensive fencing at Home Depot or something. They had to make it out of acacia wood. So somebody had to make all this stuff. And the fence was to kind of protect it from the wind and from the outside stuff. So the whole sanctuary is going to be enclosed. I don't know if you remember when we did the thing about the vineyards. God says you make a wall around everything because you're supposed to be different than what's outside of the wall. Israel was its own vineyard with a wall around it. The church is a vineyard with a wall around it. And you're not supposed to be in the church saying, you know what, we should be more like the world. Then everybody will like us better. So let's take the fence down. Israel wasn't supposed to be like the people around them. So the fence also symbolizes that. The holy things are in here. The unholy stuff is out there. In our day, we think everything's holy, everybody's holy, so everybody's cool. I'm okay, you're okay. I make up my own truth, and I make up my own beliefs, and and who are you to tell me that I'm wrong? And you can read through all this stuff about the curtains and the fence and how many boards go on each side. Everything's out of acacia wood. Some stuff gets covered with gold. But then we go down. Now, some translations may have these verses different. So in this one I'm holding, it's verse 31. And this is important. Doesn't matter what your verse is. What's important is you shall make a veil. You're going to hear about the veil from now until Good Friday when it's torn in two. And there's a reason it's torn in two. You shall make a veil woven of blue and purple and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen. It shall be woven with an artistic design of cherubim. You shall hang it upon 4 pillars of acacia wood overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be gold upon 4 sockets of silver. And you shall hang the veil from the clasps. Then you shall bring the ark of the testimony in there behind the veil. And here's the important sentence. The veil shall be a divider for you between my holy place and the most holy place. You shall put the mercy seat upon the ark of the testimony in the most holy. So this is where the Holy of Holies comes from. So you're going to make all this stuff inside the tent. Then you're going to hang this beautiful veil that's going to separate the most holy place, which is the place where you're going to put the ark, from the rest of the thing. So it's going to be the most holy here, the regular holy over here. Nobody comes through the veil because they're sinners. Nobody can approach the most holy place. This is why the veil was torn on Good Friday, because now the writer to the Hebrews says we can approach boldly. We don't have to be afraid anymore. But God is setting this up so that in Jesus, He can make the symbolism of you can't come, now you can come. And the actual thing is, maybe we can talk about this more when it gets closer to Easter time, but when they went to the temple, the veil was 6 inches thick. This was no like sheer curtain. It was 6 inches thick, and it was about 2 stories tall. And, of course, the veil was torn from top to bottom when Jesus died. And at the time that happened, at 3 p.m., there was a custom of sacrificing a lamb for the sins of the people. because it was Passover. It wasn't scriptural. It got to be a tradition, as we're going to see as we go along. So at the time they were sacrificing a lamb, a physical lamb, for the sins of the people, the true lamb was dying outside the city for the sins of the people, and that veil split in two, and the Holy of Holies was exposed, which had never been before. Dramatic. So that's what the writer to the Hebrews talks about, where now we can go through the veil. The veil was a barrier. Oh, you can only come this far. Now we're adopted sons and daughters. We call God Abba, Daddy. And so we can go through the veil. In fact, he says we can approach boldly. We don't have to go like. We can go in and say, Abba. So how cool is that? So the mercy seat can't be approached except by the high priest. So the lampstand they made, which is the menorah. Now this is different than a Hanukkah menorah, but we'll talk about that later if we didn't already. 6 candles and a center candle. That and the table are outside the veil. The ark is inside the veil. God speaks to Moses from the ark, the top of the ark. So this is a lot of stuff here that you should read for your homework through 27 and 28. We can't possibly read all this, but even though people later on are going to do the sacrifices, nobody can go through the veil except the high priest. Whether it was in the tent, from now on, there's going to be this tent in the wilderness. Then later, of course, it's going to be the temple, but not until 900 and something BC. So God lives in the tent for a long time, like probably 500 years, lives in the tent. So when David says, I'm going to build you a house because I live in a palace and you live in a tent, God says, I don't want you to build me a house. I've always lived in a tent. And you're not allowed to build me a house because you're a creep. Even though you're a man after my own heart, and you did all this stuff, you also did a lot of bad stuff, so you're not building the temple. He had already gotten all the stuff. Cedars that came down from Lebanon. He had the stone cutters cutting stone. Every day, trucks from Home Depot coming, leaving material. And then God says, no, you're not building the temple. I never asked you to. So then they're going to make an altar that's going to be acacia wood covered with bronze. And this is where the sacrifices are going to take place. It's not going to be a precious metal. It's going to be bronze. But this is where the lambs were slain. It's kind of like it's like the cross. It's a plain looking thing. But that's where the sacrifice was made. So how cool is that? It's not made out of precious stones. We have songs and stuff about, the jeweled cross and the cross of it. But, the cross was just 2 pieces of wood that was a horrible execution, instrument of execution. There wasn't anything beautiful about it other than what happened on it. But, it's not like, maybe since we're going to kill Jesus today, we should give him a nicer looking cross. It was just 2 pieces of wood. So here, the sacrifices are just made on a plain bronze altar. And they make a laver where the priest has to wash his hands before he goes into the first he's going to do a mikvah bath, then he's going to go wash his hands, then he's going to go in. We'll talk about that later. And then as time went on, this all had to be made out of bronze. They polished the bronze so when the priest bent over to wash his hands, he could see his reflection. So he could think about the fact that he was going into the holy place to do something holy, so he better kind of examine himself. So everything happened, for a purpose. And then there was a brazen altar where they burned sacrifices to get rid of whatever was left over. So all these things are specified there, and you should read it for your homework. And there's a lamp that's always burning, a sanctuary lamp that's always burning. And they had to make sure that fire never went out, because God was always present in the Holy of Holies. Yeah, like a red sanctuary light. And there was a certain group of Levites whose sole function was to make sure that light never went out. Because, of course, they had to make it out of something, They had to burn oil. And so periodically you had to go refill it. You had to trim the wick or whatever they did. And so there were people that were special for that. And then he talks about the vestments. Now, we're just going to take a minute to talk about Aaron's vestments because it's really kind of cool. Now take verse 28. Chapter 28. Now take Aaron your brother and his sons with him from among the children of Israel, that he may minister to me as priest. Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, Ithamar. And you shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother, for glory and for beauty. So you shall speak to all who are gifted artisans, whom I have filled with the spirit of wisdom, that they may make Aaron's garments and consecrate him, that he may minister to me as priest. And these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate, an ephod, a robe, a skillfully woven tunic, a turban, and a sash. So they shall be holy garments for Aaron your brother and his sons, that he may minister to me. Okay? So when the high priest goes to minister, he's going to wear special, awesome clothes. He's not going to wear these like when he goes to Panera's in the morning. He's not going to wear these if he goes out to dinner at Joe's Deli or wherever we're going. But he's going to put these on when he comes into the sanctuary, because these are holy things. And the ephod, they shall take the gold, blue, purple, scarlet thread and fine linen. They shall make the ephod of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine woven linen, artistically worked. He shall have 2 shoulder straps joined at the edges, and so it shall be joined together. And an intricately woven band of the ephod which is on it shall be of the same workmanship, made of gold, blue, purple, scarlet thread, and fine woven linen. Now here comes the cool part. You shall then take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of the son of Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, 6 of their names on the other stone, in order of their birth. With the work of an engraver in stone, like the engravings of a signet, you shall engrave the 2 stones with the names of the sons of Israel. You shall set them in settings of gold, and you shall put the 2 stones on the shoulders of the ephods as memorial stones for the sons of Israel. So Aaron shall bear their names before the Lord on his shoulders as a memorial. You shall also make settings of gold, and you shall make 2 chains of pure gold, like braided cords, and fasten the braided chains to the settings. You shall make the breastplate of judgment, artistically woven, according to the workmanship of the ephod you shall make it. Gold, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen you shall make it. It shall be doubled into a square, a span shall be its length, and a span shall be its width. That's the width of your hand. And you shall put the settings of stones in it, 4 rows of stones. Okay, then he tells you the stones. Okay, we're going to read all of this. And all these precious stones you see there are going to be in gold settings. And the stone shall have the names of the sons of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engravings of a signet, each one with its own name, and they shall be according to the 12 tribes. So you're going to make this beautiful vestment out of fine linens with all these beautiful threads. You're going to put a stone on each shoulder, 6 names here, 6 names here, in their birth order. Okay, first one born was Reuben. Last one born was Benjamin. 12 names. Then there's going to be this plate with 12 precious stones, each one for the tribes. Each of the stones has the name of the tribe on it. So when the high priest goes in to minister, he brings them before the Lord. In other words, he's bringing all the people before the Lord, because everybody's descended from one of these 12 guys. How cool is that? And he has a breastplate, so he keeps them on his heart when he's ministering. And on their shoulders, while he's working and praying, he's remembering the tribes, because the shoulders represent work. So how cool is that? So as he goes about his priestly work, he's got the 12 tribes on his shoulders, and he's also got them over his heart. And they're all made of these beautiful materials, all inlaid in gold. And he says, you notice, he says, my spirit's going to show you how to do that. You guys don't know how to do that. I mean, if we had to make something like that, he says, the spirit's going to show you how to do that. So how cool is that? So those are the main vestments of the priest. And it's all hanging, all these things are hanging on beautiful gold chains. Down in verse 29. So Aaron shall bear the names of the sons of Israel on the breastplate of judgment over his heart when he goes in the holy place, as a memorial before the Lord continually. Okay, robe. And they're going to make a robe that goes over the whole thing. And this is cool too. It's going to be decorated with pomegranates around the bottom. In Hebrew terms, a pomegranate's a sign of plenty. You know, pomegranate is a big fruit with a lot of fruit in it. So pomegranate trees are a sign of plenty. So you're going to have that. We see it too as, they would see it as not only plentiful food and stuff, but they have the sweetness of the law. They have the sweetness of the covenant. You know, we have the sweetness of the gospel. This is what this foretells. That, you know, instead of worrying about how are we keeping all these 613 laws, we have the sweetness of the gospel. It's all summarized by the pomegranate. How cool is that? And then they're going to put little bells around the bottom of it. So as the priest moves, you hear little bells ringing. Now, part of that is because it's kind of cute. He's wearing this beautiful stuff and little bells are ringing. But the other reason is he's the only one who can go into the Holy of Holies. So later they're going to tie a rope around him, around his waist, because if the guy goes into the Holy of Holies and has a heart attack and dies, or God strikes him dead, they got to pull the guy out because no one else can go in there. Or they'll get struck dead, as we're going to see. So they'd listen to the bells ringing. So as long as they heard the bells ringing, you knew the priest was moving around. If the bells stopped, they all kind of went. Okay, good, he's moving around again. Or sometimes they wouldn't hear the bells. And I don't know if they ever actually pulled anybody out. I don't think that's documented. But it's kind of a cool story. I mean, it's not a story, it's really true. But, you know, when the bell stopped, you know, they'd probably say, you okay in there, Aaron? Yeah, I'm just praying. Leave me alone. Okay. If they heard a thud and then no more bells. Tell Jordan that one. So how cool is that? So all these elaborate things. And then it's all topped off with a turban that's made out of this beautiful cloth. And on it is engraved, holiness to the Lord. So Aaron then, as high priest, also becomes a type of Christ, becomes a type of Messiah, because he stands in the holy place with all this beautiful stuff on, and he's holy unto the Lord. So he becomes kind of a picture of Jesus in his glorified state. So how cool is that? Woo! The rabbis don't quite see it that way yet, but maybe in a few months they will. It's going to be soon. I hope it's today, but it's going to be soon. Woo! So all this is made for a purpose. And then they had a kind of an ordination for Aaron. They put him in water, a mikvah. He had to go sit in the flowing water to take the purity off of him. Then he put all this cool stuff on. Then they anointed him with oil and said, okay, now you're officially the high priest. So they had this kind of beautiful ordination ceremony. So he puts all this cool stuff on. Now, granted, he's going to be the one who's going to make the golden calf pretty soon, but this is the kind of stuff he's going to get to wear and do. How cool is that? And you can read all this, he's going to have sashes. It even talks about how to make his underwear. I mean, nothing is, you don't just go to Target and buy some jockey shorts. You have to make linen underwear in a certain way. Everything is specified. Yeah, they're washed with water, then they put the garments on, and then they're anointed, so they're consecrated. So they're going to be high priests, and then every high priest after that is going to be a descendant of Aaron until it gets down to when the Romans came, then it wasn't as clear. And then the other important thing, and then we're going to end, is the sacrificial system starts now. Talks about how while you're doing this, a bull's going to be sacrificed. You're going to put the blood on stuff. Then Aaron and the priests are going to be doing their own sacrifices. They're going to be perpetual priests. Perpetual priests. They're Levitical. They're from the family of Levi, and only Aaron's descendants can be high priests. And so it talks about how from then on, every morning and every evening, a lamb is going to be sacrificed for the sins of the people. Ongoing sacrifice. Always blood before the Lord. Why? Because life is in the blood. Because sin happens, and sin causes you to die. Not just spiritually, physically too. Paul says all men sin, therefore all men die. So blood is always before the Lord, and of course, it all prefigures the cross. Because the blood of Jesus is always before the throne. You don't get what you deserve, because everybody deserves hell, but you don't get what you deserve because the blood is always there. So that's the prefigurement. Woo! So in Exodus 29, I like this at the end of the handout there. God will meet with the people at the tent. I will dwell with them, and they will know that I am their God. So when you have all this stuff made, I'm going to live there, and you're going to know it. Even though you're a bunch of creeps, and you're always going to rebel, and you're not going to remember any of this, you're going to know I'm always there. Whew, that's a lot of